Good evening, everybody. And wow, this is a great turnout. Thank you all for coming on this spring is in the air evening, which I think is a very appropriate thing for our very special event tonight, because we are featuring not only established writer and Dalhousie writer-in-residence Carol Bruneau, but also some budding writers from around the campus. Oh, what an awful pun. The reading this evening is part of a series of the Canadian Literary Collections Project, public reading series, CLCP. It's an initiative based here at the Killam Library to collect and promote maritime and local writers. So we've been running this reading series since, I think it's been since 1990, whoa. And it's also sponsored by the Canada Council, which is very generously supporting Dalhousie's Writer-in-Residence program this year. So you are in for a real treat. As you probably know if you've seen the poster and the announcements, Carol will give a reading from her latest novel, Glass Voices, which was an absolutely fabulous book. And then we are going to have an open mic session, and some of her braver students have volunteered to stand up behind the mic and give us a little taste of what they've been working on with Carol. And I can just imagine how inspiring you must be to them, Carol, because not only are you hugely talented, but very down to earth and just the soul of kindness, so the perfect mentor, I would imagine. We have a fully packed program tonight, so I am now going to turn things over to Andy Wainwright. And thank you all again for coming. Enjoy the show.
Hi, my name is Andy Wainwright. I used to be in the English department until I took early retirement last year. And a number of years ago, I started the creative writing program along with Leslie Choice and David Overton from the Department of Theatre. That's where David is from. It's my privilege tonight to introduce Carol Bruneau, who is going to read. Carol is not only a very fine writer of fiction, as evidenced by her winning the Thomas Riddall Award and the Dartmouth Book Award for her first novel, Purple for Sky, but she's also published another novel, Birth and Glass Voices, as was indicated, which the Globe and Mail named as one of its top books of 2008. And she's published 2 short story collections as well. Now, I view Carol as somewhat of an anomaly in the creative writing community because she's a genuinely nice person and she has a tremendous set of interpersonal skills. That doesn't mean that the rest of us in the writing club are without affability or that we can't get downright sociable when the situation demands it. But Carol has a constant concern, shows a constant concern for the creative well-being of others and is able to communicate that concern. A year and a half ago, when we decided to apply to the Canada Council for a writer-in-residence, we wanted to fill the position with a writer of quality, a writer who knew the local as well as the national scene, and a writer who would bring not only experience and knowledge, but also the human touch to discussions of creative writing with students on an individual and in group experience. And Carol clearly represents all 3 of these facets in admirable ways. She's a true ambassador of the creative writing program at Dalhousie and of the art of writing itself, the writer's craft. And I think that's attested to by everybody who knows her, both professionally and personally, and also, of course, those students who have been fortunate enough to be in her seminars this term. So it's with a great deal of pleasure that I ask you to welcome Carol Bruneau.
Thank you, Andy. That was astonishing. I don't know if I can live up to that intro. And I would like to thank Andy again and all the people responsible for putting together the residency this semester. It's been a wonderful experience for me, very rich and rewarding in all ways. And I would like to thank all of you for coming out tonight and especially for supporting our new writers. I guess this reading has been billed as coming to life. What does that mean? Words, stories. to me, these things allow us entry into other people's lives, other worlds, other experiences. So this winter, it's been my privilege to visit the worlds, many worlds offered up by the many writers I've worked with on campus and on the internet. And that includes students, faculty, and alumni. I've had the pleasure of reading many astonishing works in progress, from scientific memoirs to poetry, children's stories, novels, and short stories in various genres. And I can truly attest to the fact that Dalhousie is a hotbed of creative writing, which you will get a taste of tonight. And as you get to hear some of the students read, some of the people I've been working with, and most of these young writers, this is their first time sharing their work with an audience out loud like this. So it's a great thing. And again, I hope these open mic sessions continue on after my term ends. So all this whole experience for me, in many ways, has been like a passport into a collective imagination. In some ways, the underworld or the overworld of the imagination, the part inside all of us where so much originates. Now, in our workshops, our mantra has been, with fiction, with the imagination, all things are possible. Fiction being a place where, as Margaret Atwood would affirm in her book, Negotiating with the Dead, in various ways, the dead come to life. In some of the stories you will hear tonight, perhaps even more than you would think. And they can get quite chatty at times. So I would like to open the evening with a reading from my most recent novel, Glass Voices, which is about a woman and her husband who survived the Halifax explosion. This woman, Lucy, spends a lot of time trying to tune out dead people's voices. In many ways, the story is a quest in which Lucy seeks to find the daughter she lost that day in 1917. The wild and crazy hope that somehow, some way, her small missing child, Helena, has survived is what sustains Lucy, even as it eats away at her, even as life goes on. She and her husband, Harry, go on to have a son who was born right after the explosion in a tent on the Commons in the blizzard the next day, but we won't go there. And their son, Jewel, goes on to marry Rebecca, and they have a son named Robert, Lucy's grandson, and so on. So again, their lives do go on, and they rebuild from this catastrophic experience. But no matter what happens, Lucy can never seem to pull herself out of this sort of netherworld of not knowing or accepting her daughter's fate. And while imagining that Helena is somewhere, somehow still alive, and she's kind of in some sort of netherworld as well, I guess. And then when Harry suffers a stroke, and this is in their old age, 52 years later, the trauma of this forces Lucy to revisit her responses to that earlier and more devastating trauma. So anyway, I'm telling you the whole story. No, a lot of it. And I have to stop that. But anyway, Harry recovers from this stroke but remains an invalid, and Lucy has to look after him, which is quite challenging and difficult. And one night on TV, she sees something about miraculous healing at the shrine in Lourdes, France. And then she reads about a shrine closer to home. It's what I've made up, so don't go trying to find it. At the top of a mountain in the middle of nowhere on Cape Breton Island. Desperate for Harry to get better, grasping at straws, she talks her son, Jewel, into taking her there. So they take this little road trip. So tonight I would like to read from a section that takes place on this mountain at this tiny and very remote chapel. It's an experience in which Lucy's hope and doubt collide, taking her back to a moment, the moment that changed so many lives forever. The devil's paintbrush tickles her ankles as she wades up to the door, thistles snagging her slacks. Her knees click, climbing the punky steps. Painted mud brown, the door feels like warm taffy under her palm. She half expects it to be locked, but it gives easily, a horsefly buzzing into the vestibule the size of a coffin. There's a candle stuck to the windowsill. Outside, scowling at the sun, Jewel flings the spare tire to the ground. Beside the dusty baptismal font is a wood stove with a jar marked donations, some quarters at the bottom. Drifting forwards, it seems best to tiptoe, her very presence causing a stir, the flies zigzagging overhead. Kneeling in a boxy pew, she stifles a sneeze. Everything smells musty. Shabby hymnals rest on the battered piano, faded plastic flowers decorating the altar laid with a grimy cloth set for communion. Happy are those called to the supper of the Lamb. The painted words arch over the cracked plaster. Celebrate the good news, too plain and forthright. Curtsying awkwardly, blessing herself, she loiters in the aisle. All this way, and this is it? Happy are those who can get the hell out of here, Jewel booms behind her. He's in a complete sweat, his shirt unbuttoned. She can see the tip of his scar. Great news, Ma. The tire's done like dinner, he says, and he's going to have to walk. No asking if she minds being left. Little choice anyway, given her knees. Sit tight. There's people down there somewhere, he says, with more spunk than she feels. Outside, the breeze is balmy as he shambles off. Outside, she spies something she had missed, an arrow nailed to a spruce bleeding sap. Just ahead is a mossy path. Let all who are thirsty drink, says a sign, its lettering burnt into the wood. Wetness seeps between her toes, but not far in there's a glen with a tiny pool edged with sandstones. Rest here, and may the Blessed Virgin be upon you. It figures. The bag with the containers is back at the car, lying on the dirt. Squatting carefully, she peers down at the water. Not a foot deep, murk bubbling from a crack so tiny she has to strain to see it. Pushing up her sleeve, she dips her hand. The water is shockingly cool, yet lifeless. The rock slimy to the touch. What was she expecting? A fizz, like ginger ale? A burning, tingling? Holy fire, holy something. Cupping her hand, she dips it again, considers taking a taste. But was it fit? Sure, if you're a raccoon, Jewel might have said. You don't want to get the trots traveling. That would be Rebecca. The image in the magazine of the arthritic woman fills her, the notion of her dunking her hands. Nobody in the magazine had mentioned drinking the water. Tugging her pant legs higher, she rolls them up over her knees. As if she's kneeled in paint, the scars resemble potato prints, like Robert used to do in school. And after all these years, the color of a night sky, a deep, vacant blue. Starlight, star bright, she mutters aloud, splashing each knee, wincing. A murmured blessing. A blessing, perhaps, there isn't another soul around to hear her. Squinting, she lets her eyes bleach each scar on her knee a gentler blue. As the sun tilts behind the little spire of the church, she hobbles out to the car. Her purse is on the seat where she left it. Digging inside, she finds the aspirin bottle tucked there at the last minute. She's thirsty now, really thirsty and famished. How long since lunch? Her toes feel clammy, gritty, the knee-highs yanked on too hastily. Where can he be? She aims the question at the steep little roof, a turkey-sized bird perched there, an eagle. Fingers closed around the pill bottle, she ambles purposefully back to the pool. The water clouds and fizzes with crumbs of aspirin. Acetylsalicylic acid, she imagines Rebecca rhyming off. Always the expert. No antiseptic? An antiseptic? Not likely. But she takes a sip anyway. The water tastes sour, peaty. Tightening the lid, she gives the bottle a shake, feels a stab of worry, hairy. There's a flap of wings, crows. In the bushes, squirrels natter. Doubling back through the stretching shadows, she re-enters the shabby little sanctuary. Shadows wash the corners, shrouding the altar but for a mote of brilliance. She tries to picture a priest offering communion, the host a tiny stone in that brook of light. For a second, it's as if she's submerged. Praying helps pass the time. To an explosion of cause outside, she pictures a rash of wheelchairs on TV pushing towards the famous grotto. For everyone who's ailing, not just Harry, she tries to be inclusive in her prayers, clasping her hands tightly, with the souvenir water in her pocket and her knees bathed. It seems petty not to be. But against the image of Harry bedridden, even with time on her hands, it's hard maintaining pity, upholding all who need help. Mrs. Slonwhite's granddaughter on the pill, pothead son-in-law, somebody else's husband, the one with cancer. Her heart can barely stretch wide enough to channel it all, the needs of the world, the poor and the homeless, the almost homeless, like Miss Van Buskirk and that crazy Benny, let alone her needs and Harry's and the others. Lord have mercy, it's enough to make a martyr throw in the towel. And then there's Robert. At the windows, the sun blazes orange, then red. There's a scuffling, raccoons perhaps, overly hopeful, scrounging for food. "O ye of little faith," the scratching seems to say, and plucking up her nerve, she ventures outside again. Trekking back to the pool, she's thirsty, desperately so, and out of nowhere, the awful thought comes to her of miners trapped underground drinking their pee. Dusk has painted the water and trees black, staining her hands and clothes purple, dissolving everything to blue. Only the wind whistles through the branches, damp and alive and fragrant. Nothing, yet everything, she thinks. No more, no less. As she kneels there, a sliver of moon crosses her own reflection, rippling back, ghostly against the jagged tree line. Christmas trees, a forest of tents. Stumbling back, the darkness, a country darkness, pitch now, complete. She feels her way into the vestibule. Loony to be afraid. Who or what is there to fear? Pressing her palm over the planked wall, she searches for a switch. But there's only the candle. And as she steps out into the fizzling moonlight, a memory arcs, searing her. Stealing her breath, it lifts and drops her. The slash of time years ago, when everything had split apart. A divide of darkness. The instant the floor had let go underfoot, and she had felt herself airborne. Helena, the thought pierces her, and out there in the darkness, something howls. As she moves towards the car, it cries out again, but she isn't really hearing it. Suddenly, instantly, she's transported, her knees smooth again, supple. Catching her breath at the foot of the stairs, the sound of crying echoing down to her. There she is, still in her nightie, lollygagging as if she has all day, picking up the milk, inspecting herself in the coat stand mirror, rubbing her big, round belly, and nearly 9 o'clock in the morning. Ship on fire! The fellow in the downstairs flat had yelled. And upstairs, crying, the little one teething, always teething, her own breath had fogged the glass. Harry hollering down, "Where are you, Dolly?" Bracing herself for the stairs, she had adjusted her smile. Careful, don't show your gums like the felt edging the accordion's keys. Peeling the child's fingers away. Once more, she is getting dressed. London Bridge is falling down, 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 down. Helena yanking on her itchy stockings, teetering, bawling. In the kitchen, she's splashing water into the pan for eggs, stoking the fire, cracking each egg and sliding it in. 1, 2, 3. Those baby fingers climbing. Hot, 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 and Harry yelling from the bedroom, "Where'd you put my—" In the blackness, Lucy feels for the handle, yanks open the car door. Light floods the interior. A moth flutters. A match. That's what she needs, a match. Sliding in, shivering, barely noticing her knees, confused, she tugs at the ashtray. Nothing but butts, half of them lipstick stained. Jesus, Dolly, Harry's voice echoes down the steps and hallways of all those years. Smell something burning? Lucy, you seen my... But she's prying Helena's fingers away, pushing London Bridge on her lips, and not a split second later, no time to pry or slap or squeeze, her lips had spread in a scream that stuck in her throat as the windows blew in and the ceiling opened and the blitz of wind ripped her hand ripped it away so fast. All she saw, God of mercy, of miracles, was the skillet rocketing upward, the milky spritz of egg flying up and out, pieces of the house tailing her like the wake of a comet. She had felt herself being sucked skyward. Flying, cartwheeling through space, her body walked, then spun like a jack, tossed and dropped. It had all happened faster than sound. A hand, sweaty as her own, scouring the stairs the day before, the hand that saved her, spinning with her in a vortex. The air in the car is close as that hand reaching through the stream of metal and glass. Trembling, she opens the glove compartment, claws through it. A spare pack of cigarettes unopened, bills for repairs, a book on maintenance, a pen light whose batteries are dead and no matches, not one. The forest tightens, pressing closer. A vision, long buried, of Christmas trees bent in a blizzard, stretching for blocks, the headless ghosts of nurses, soldiers weaving between them, the screaming wind, a baby crying. Abandoned, weaving back to the chapel, she feels her way inside. The walls are the color of dirty snow, but, curling inwardly, furled like a bud, she lays herself out in the pew. The worn wood, fallen rubble. If only, the voices mock, a trinity, Harry's, Mama's, and that tiny, childish, barely formed one, Helena's. Eleanor's? No. If only she had been more patient and good, like Holy Mary, and with the forgiveness of Job kept those tiny, creeping fingers locked in hers. Thank you. So I was telling the students a little while ago that I've got a theme in mind for tonight, and it's sort of this idea of the underworld. Yes, all those voices down there. At any rate, writing creatively, as anyone who does it knows, is an act of bravery, an act of optimism, passion, and it's a leap of faith. It's about creating things out of thin air and having the faith that the words you choose will come to life for a reader, for a listener. So tonight it gives me tremendous joy to introduce to you 11 of the writers I've been very privileged to work with this semester. All of them will be taking you to very different places on very different journeys, some quite literally to the underworlds of myth and fantasy, and others to the underworld of reality. These are journeys through darkness and through light and to light. All of these young writers delight in words as their medium for building the other alternative worlds given to us by stories, the uber world of the imagination. Please join me in giving them all a very warm welcome. So first up, I would like to invite Sarah Heisler up. Sarah is a first-year student at Dalhousie, and she's studying, she can correct me if I'm wrong, environmental design? Community design. Okay. And she's taking classes in mythology. She has been writing and telling stories since her early childhood and is presently at work on a fantasy novel that explores issues of gender. Welcome, Sarah.
So the excerpt I'm going to be reading is a section from a novel that I'm working on called Faking My Biography. And the main character, Kira, is writing her memoirs after her murder, beginning with her childhood and working towards the aftermath of the event. So the section is A Story and Deadly Reasoning Discussed. 7 days, 1 week. Sometimes I think that it probably should have taken longer. And then I remember the kind of people who attacked me. Scared people. And scared people make mistakes. They let themselves get caught. So do people who make no secret of their bigotry and hate. I still haven't figured out which is worse. The people who hate loudly and can be combated and debunked, or those who hate in silence and poison and kill everything around them. The people who killed me were a mix, but they had one commonality: hate. They hated me with a passion that's usually only seen in the strongly religious. Can you imagine how much better a place this world could be if they'd used that passion for something good? That's not to say that they hated me specifically. It was more that they hated what I stood for. I would tell you that I stood for love, life, and freedom. They would tell you that I stood for evil, depravity, sexual perversion, and moral corruption. These are the people who are homophobic, anti-choice, against gender equality, and believe global warming an extremist myth. They're racist, believe that poor people deserve to be poor, that those with disabilities are simply paying for their sins, and that anyone who chooses not to marry and have kids is going against the natural order of things. To them, animals, women, and children are property. Men can't wear pink, women can't wear pants, and gender is not only fact, it's written in stone. They saw only one right way, and I wasn't part of it. They were scared of everything that didn't fit, and hated me for reminding them that, when you came right down to it, they didn't fit either. More often than not, fear and hate go hand in hand. Those 7 days are also important for another reason, one that absolutely broke my heart. I could deal with dying. I could live with being dead, pun notwithstanding. It was watching the aftermath of my demise that I had trouble with. I saw my parents, shocked, angry. They wanted blood. They blamed those who killed me, and they blamed Blaze and Rowan. I wish I could comfort them, tell them that if they wanted to do something to honor my memory, they'd support those like myself. More than anything, I wish I could undo what my death and its ramifications did to my lovers, to my heart. Shock is one of the first steps you usually go through after someone you care about dies. Then comes denial. Then comes guilt. Rowan blamed herself because she felt that being with her had endangered me because liking girls isn't generally considered normal. Blaze blamed himself because he felt that approaching us had endangered me because polyamory isn't exactly accepted here either. They both thought that they had placed me in an exceptionally dangerous position because I visibly identified as bi, polysexual, polyamorous, and generally queer, especially because I was known for ignoring, thumbing my nose at, gender. There were those who supported them, but they were shocked and bewildered themselves. When you remember how vocal my parents got in their dislike or blame of them, it's no surprise that, given their despair and broken hearts, they broke too. That 7th day found them clinging to each other. The next day saw their world explode again. It only took 2 days for my murderers to be set free. Someone cited insufficient evidence. Others say that it was just that what had happened obviously wasn't a hate crime. They were just doing what they felt was justified to preserve the higher moral values of their communities. The killer's freedom was the last straw for Blaze and Rowan's already shattered states. It shouldn't be all that surprising, then, what happened next. Surely you've seen the statistics for suicide among queer youths. Whatever your view of suicide, I think it's safe to say that what they did was at once horrendous and wonderfully explosive. Maybe if it hadn't been the two together that I'd left behind, it wouldn't have happened. Maybe any lover I'd left behind would have killed themselves. I don't know. All I know is that they shattered the safe worlds of those around them on that last day. They wrote their final words in their own blood. I saw them do it.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, we have Malaku Asafa. Malaku is in his 3rd year of a business degree here at Dalhousie. The first thing he ever wrote, he tells me, was poetry for a scene between a father and his son in a play that was being put on in his high school in his native Ethiopia. Malaku continued to write poetry in his first language, Amharic, and went on to win several poetry prizes during his time at Jimma University. Since coming to Canada 3 years ago, he has been focusing on writing poetry in English, his second language, and using his work to express themes of social justice. Welcome, Malaku.
Thank you, Carol, for a wonderful introduction. And thank you for the chance and for shaping my writing. I have three poems, three different poems. The first one is about my father. I lost him when I finished high school. I love him, and as a father and as a friend. So 2 years ago, I saw him in my dream, and it was wonderful, and I put that point in a poetry. So the title is In the Garden of Eden. I was walking alone, watching the sunset in the Garden of Eden. I saw something amusing. It's unbelievable, ever fascinating. I twisted myself for an instant. My knees tremble. My heart is beating uncomfortably fast. Make sure no one is listening. The huge noise inside of me, while my heart pounds. Tears flow down, in joy and disbelief, seeing what's already gone in the Garden of Eden. Somebody rang my bell, woke me up, not in the Garden of Eden. I wish I had said something to the man in the Garden of Eden, that I'll do anything to make his name everlasting. And the second one is about a guy missing his beloved one. The title is Missing Bird. The little bird in the autumn escaped in the winter, fled the snowfall. It's quiet and cold, nothing left in town, destroyed by the storm. How sweet was the time, watching you fly toward the sunshine. Now you are out there, ocean away from home, breathing warm air. I wish I heard you singing from where you are, learned what you're saying. Sunlight deep inside me, trees and flowers in the bottom, that's the place you need to be. Where are you, little bird? Let me hear your voice and put you in my heart. You have a special place, little bird. Come build your nest in the garden of my heart. And the last one is about children in the third world who are in problem. The title is Children of the Night. Children in the third world sold, exploited, and abused. Their hopes fallen to the ground. At the age of 8 to 14, they are out for fishing and forced to prostitution. Thousands are victimized when they walk alone, desperate and alienated. They are also in the war zone, well trained to shoot people using machine gun. They can't do it right because we exploit them and deprive them of right. Well, they can't do anything as far as we force them to do our own thing. Honestly, they are making a difference, fulfilling the interest of those selfish and small thinkers. Let's keep it from happening. It's something immoral, child trafficking. There is so much to offer, but justice comes first. That's all they are asking for. Let's protect the young victims' right. Lighting someone else's candle doesn't make ours any less bright. Thank you.
Thank you, Malaku. Next up, we have Ben Stevenson. Ben is a NASCAD student on a bit of a hiatus from his studies there to take some creative writing courses here. A little over a year ago, Ben started writing and kept writing. Foolishly, he says, he started writing a novel. Incredibly, and I quote, He finished a very short draft. Unfortunately, he says, fortunately for us, I say, he is going to read from it tonight and give us a taste of the world from the point of view of a very precocious boy. Welcome, Ben.
Hi. Yes, so I've been working on this book, and it's from the point of view of a 10-year-old boy named Arthur, and he's, very precocious. That's a word I actually never thought about before Carol said that he was precocious, but it's the perfect word, I think. And so he's adopted and recently has realized that, he hasn't realized, but he's really not happy with that fact, so he's kind of an imaginative escapist and goes through these fantasies of what his real dad is probably doing, which are always these amazing things compared to his extremely boring normal dad. And it's just, this scene that I'm going to read doesn't really have much to do with the main plot because it's a very short little event. But this is when he's hanging out with two other kids who live on his street named Victoria and Finch. And Victoria likes Arthur, and Finch is dating Arthur. Finch is dating Victoria, and Arthur doesn't want to date anybody. Anyway. Yes. So we played Scrabble on the gray carpet in Finch's living room. I was winning, but Victoria was close. "That's not a word," I said. Finch looked at the letters he had just put on the board and then back at me. "Yeah, it is," he said. "Triple word score." "Trane is not a word," I said. "Are you retarded?" "Train," I said. "Take it off the board." "No way, pass the dictionary." He never believed me until he looked in the dictionary. I sighed loud enough for him to hear so that he'd know how annoying he was being. He didn't seem to know. I looked over at Victoria. She gave me a kind of smile that made me feel weird, like she was very happy to see me all the time. She had been acting silly lately. "Why don't you just ask your girlfriend?" I said. Finch froze. After a second, he looked at Victoria, smiled quickly, then glared at me. "I'm looking in the dictionary. That's how you do it." "Arthur's right," Victoria said. "That's not a word." "Fine," Finch said. He started flicking the letters off the board. Some of them ran into other letters in the words that were already there. "Hey, you're messing the game up. Whatever." "Don't be a sore loser like that," I said. "Just make a real word and keep playing." "I don't even want to play this retarded game anyway." "Simon, come on," Victoria said. "Don't be a baby." "Baseballing isn't a word either, I'm pretty sure," he said, making mean eyebrows at Victoria. "You can't just go adding ing onto anything like that." "At least it's spelt right," I said. Finch got up and walked out of the room. On the way, he stepped right in the middle of the board, and all the letters fell out of the words they had been and spelled a whole bunch of nonsense all over the board. I looked over at Victoria. She was trying hard not to laugh. "What's so funny?" I asked. "He's just so serious," she said. "He takes it so seriously." Then I laughed a little bit. "Do you want to set it back up again?" I asked. It's probably because I dumped him," Victoria said. "When did you do that?" "Yesterday." "That's weird. Why are you at his house?" "You guys invited me over." "Yeah, but why did you say yes?" "I don't know," she said. "What else am I supposed to do?" "I don't know." I swept all the letters off the board and dropped handfuls of them into the slippery plastic bag they belonged in. "Maybe I want you to be my boyfriend instead." Victoria was looking down at the carpet and tracing circles in it with her finger. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I kept putting the letters into the bag. "Arthur?" "Mm-hmm." I didn't look up at her. "Maybe I want you to be my boyfriend," I said. "I heard you." "Well, why aren't you saying anything?" "I am saying stuff. You're being mean. I can't be your boyfriend. Why not?" I stopped putting letters in the bag. Victoria crossed her arms. I picked up the Scrabble board, folded it in half, and put it back inside the box. "I don't know," I said. "I just can't. You should just date Finch. He's not that bad." "What are you talking about?" "Nothing. I don't know. Sorry, I just can't be your boyfriend." "Do you hate me or something?" "No way, not at all. I don't." "Well, then why did you kiss me yesterday?" "You kissed me. You hate me." "No, I don't." Victoria's mouth twisted into some new kind of smile that I had never seen anyone make before. It was a kind of like a smile of someone who knows something you don't, who is keeping a secret, and kind of like a bad guy smile, except she wasn't a bad guy. It wasn't an evil smile, just a curious one. I didn't know why she made it. "Fine," she said. "I'm going to go," I said, and then I went to the hall, put my boots on, and left Finch's house. I have no idea where Finch had disappeared to. I walked home thinking about how silly girls can be. They were only boyfriend-girlfriend for a couple of days and she broke up with him. And then suddenly he thinks it's fine to go around spelling words like Trane. On top of that, they never hugged or held hands or anything whenever I was around. He barely even talked to her. And she said he never even tried to French her. I just didn't get it. Maybe she really was in love with me instead. What a silly person. I was glad to have escaped her. I was in a good mood, feeling like I was just one kid in the whole universe, and I felt okay to be that. I could do whatever I wanted. If I felt like spending all day in the woods, I could. If I felt like never talking to anyone ever again, I could. I didn't need Victoria to be my girlfriend. Look what it did to Finch. Besides, I saw her all the time anyway. I ran for a little bit, because it was fun to go fast. I ran till my lungs burned fiery from not breathing enough. I had tons of energy. I spotted an especially pretty rock on the side of the road, one of those crazy quartz rocks that looks kind of like an ugly diamond. It was a big one, almost as big as a baseball. I kicked it up the hill a bit. It flew for a while and stopped, then slowly wiggled and rolled back down to me. I kicked it again, farther up the hill, and in a while it rolled back down to my foot again. I carefully kicked that one single rock all the way home and left it in our driveway. The end.
Thank you, Ben. Next, we have Shannon. Shannon White is a fourth-year English student who has been writing since she was 5. Not long after, she tells me, she developed an obsession for all things Titanic. Later in elementary school, she tells me she would get into trouble for writing 40-page stories about the fated ship. She has so far completed the first drafts of 4 novels, written many short stories, and she has an online blog for sharing her writing. She loves writing stories about teenagers for a young adult audience. Please welcome Shannon.
This is a chapter, the story is actually untitled right now. I'm working through it. It's about change and what happens when you're faced with change, and instead of trying to embrace it, you kind of go the other way and try to change life yourself and make a big change. So it's about a girl who something happens and she decides that she's done with this town she's living in and she leaves. So this is the first chapter. Here's the box. Dad stuffed an oversized box into the back of my sister's beat-up hatchback Volkswagen. In Mom's clear handwriting, it read closet, as though no one would be able to tell when you opened the box. My older sister Charlie sat in the front seat, impatiently tapping her hands against the steering wheel, oversized sunglasses covering her bloodshot eyes. Are you sure you girls won't need anything else? I think we'll be okay, Charlie answered for me, leaning out the window. Mom walked down the cement steps of the house where she'd been sitting the whole time. This moving thing was too difficult for her. Charlie had been a given. She was always the free spirit. It was obvious that when the time came, she would leave. But I was another story altogether. I was the good one, the safe bet. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Mom was teary-eyed, her mascara smeared. You can change your mind if you want to. Mom. My voice was soft. You know I can't do that. Don't worry. Charlie was out of the car now, standing behind me. I'll take good care of her. Sisterly, she slipped an arm around my shoulders. But we really should get a move on it. I'd like to get home before too late. I still have some groceries to buy. Charlie was only supposed to pick me up and my stuff, and we would go. But that had turned into lunch, and Mom crying, and the day had been wasted considerably. Dad nodded. Mom sniffed. Oh, okay. I understand. I never meant for this to be hard on anyone. And watching both my parents get emotional was hard. It made me feel bad for Charlie. They hadn't been 1/10 this emotional when she had moved away. They had practically thrown a party. I wrapped my arms around both my parents, pulling them in close to me, taking in my last memories, standing there. Their smells, the way they stood, everything. I love you both so much, I assured them, tears welling in my eyes, and I'll be home to visit before you know it. I promise. There was a look there. This is just something I have to do. Charlie put a hand on my shoulder, impatiently. Come on, let's go. The car was small and stuffed with all my worldly possessions. A month and a half ago, I would have thought this long drive would have been in my parents' SUV and only involved driving across town to go to the university. This was almost bittersweet. Starting the ignition, Charlie smiled in my direction. "Don't worry, okay?" she reassured. "They will be fine." I nodded, taking a deep breath. This was what I wanted. This was the reason I had called her, asking if I could move in. All I needed was a change of scene, something new. Langley was too full of bad memories, and it was time to move on. To something greater, somewhere where no one knew my name. Charlie was about to back out, onto our great adventure, when a car pulled up in front of our driveway, blocking us in. I didn't have to see the driver, or even the car, to know who it was. "What the f—" she cursed. I unbuckled my seatbelt. "This will just take a second." Sean was already out of the car, leaning against the hood, when I walked up. As nonchalant as he was trying to look, there was fear in his eyes. "Rachel said I should get down here as soon as possible," he informed me, even before I had the chance to ask what he was doing. Part of me didn't care to know. "I thought you weren't planning this whole move thing until after school got back into session." I didn't see the point in waiting. "Seriously, Rory, you're being stupid," he said. My eyes widened, and I stared at him. "That's not what I meant. I just mean," he let out a sigh, "I don't see why you're skipping town to live with your sister." I crossed my arms over my chest. "What's the point of staying here? I already withdrew my acceptance from the university. You didn't have to do that. And honestly, I don't feel like sticking around here. The people I thought I could trust, well, they've proven otherwise." My gaze was icy. "Can you really blame me for wanting to get the hell out of here as quickly as possible?" Sean gulped. "Listen, if this is about what happened between me and Rachel," putting up my hand, I cut him off. "Don't, okay? You made your decision and it's done. Don't think that you can change that. And don't think I'm only doing this because of what happened between you two. You don't deserve that much credit, to be honest." Pausing, I glanced back towards Charlie, who didn't look impressed. "You should really just get back in your car and go. Because if you don't, Charlie's going to recreate that scene from 10 Things I Hate About You, and your dad won't be impressed if his car gets trashed. Rory, you get one more warning, and then I'm moving out of the way and letting Charlie drive." Sean nodded, backing up. For a second, it seemed like he was going to fight, that he had something else to say. Instead, he just climbed into the car, speeding off, squealing his tires in the distance. With a loud, tired sigh, I climbed back into my sister's car, leaning my head against her shoulder. Now getting out of here was even more appealing. "It's okay," I whispered. "We can go now." "And finally," Charlie said, leading me through the fair-sized apartment, "your bedroom." Pushing open a heavy door, she flicked on a light, revealing a fair-sized room. There was a bed, pushed to one side, a couple odd pieces of furniture, and a record player. With everything I was bringing, I wasn't expecting there to be so much already in here. "That's just Jake's stuff that he left here," she explained. "I mean, you can keep what you like. He doesn't care much. I guess the new woman has all he needs." That was part of the reason I was moving in with my sister. Her other roommate, Jake, had abandoned her when he had hooked up with some older, rich woman who happened to like his art. Turned out, we both needed each other when it came down to it. So, what do you think? I dropped my bag against the hardwood floor. Everything else was still in the car. "It's nice, different." "I know it's not Mom and Dad's place," she said, reading my homesick eyes. "But I mean, you wanted different, didn't you?" I nodded, thinking back to the night I had called her in tears and the moments that had led me here. This was what I wanted. It had to be. There was no going back now. Whatever happened, I needed to deal with it. "Anyways, we can get you some curtains and stuff at the farmer's market on Saturday. The market is awesome. I always buy my groceries there, if I can." Charlie smiled. She was trying to bring me into her life as much as possible, and it was nice. "Anyways, are you hungry or anything? I think there's some leftover takeout in the fridge if you want, and there's like half a bottle of wine, too. We could make a meal of it." "I'm okay. I'm still full from Dad's lasagna. I think I just want to bring my stuff in and maybe get some sleep." Charlie nodded. "Well, that's cool. There's a party up the hall later to friends that I was planning on going to. You don't mind, do you?" I shook my head. "Okay. Well, I'll help you bring in your stuff then." She was quick to pop out of the room, probably already halfway to the car. I paused, just looking around my new home, scared. This was huge, and it was scary, and I already felt like calling Mom and asking her to come pick me up. But I couldn't do that. Sometimes you just had to grow up, and it was time for me to grow up. I could do this. After all, if I could survive without Sean, and we were going on 1 month, a week, and 4 days apart, then I could pretty much do anything. With another deep breath, I followed my sister.
Thank you, Shannon. Next up, we have Laura Daw. Laura is studying history and creative writing here at Dal. She writes for the Dal Gazette, and she says she started writing, and I'm quoting her, when she realized life was going to be pretty boring if she didn't make it interesting herself. And so she started keeping a journal. By age 14, she says, she considered herself very worldly and well-read. At 17, she was both pleased and dismayed to find that she wasn't. And so she began writing fiction. Welcome, Laura.
Uh-oh, this might have been a bad thing to start. It's under someone else's advice. Okay, that's mortifying. To write your own introduction at 7 a.m. This is from like a 17-page short story. It's about a 20-year-old girl. She's been traveling all summer, and she's currently driving back to her home, which is in Halifax, with her friend, and she's pregnant. So here we go. Just so you know, I'm not nervous at all. We drive through the night with ghost stories our moms and friends have told us. Bethany smokes a lot. I smoke a little and gag behind a closed gas station. We're aching, but in New Brunswick at dawn, and the sun lights up the prettiest world. Bethany takes photos with her Holga, and when we pull over to pee, with the long grass up our bodies. She'll stay with me for a month and a half while my roommate's away doing a play. I'll introduce her to Mona. I drink a big fountain pop for breakfast, and it tastes so good. Tomorrow is my birthday. I am so thirsty all the time now. Water is nothing. I need the fruits, and I suck their juices in my mouth, begging throatfuls from berries. Grapes and grapes and grapes. Andy was born rich. His family lost the money, but kept the power. He takes me to a hidden food court. I roll my tongue over raw, smooth sushi like a smile through my cheeks. We sneak into a movie at the theater in the mall, like always, by using the handicapped elevator. We get caught by the manager, so Andy pretends he's there to get a job application, and we escape with no more punishment than a fat-faced popcorn glare. We sit by the water in the public gardens, and then it happens. 3 pigeons land on Andy's arms. More and more and more on his shoulders and me. They make wind of the air and their wings, desperate to be near us. I can't breathe from laughing, and I turn my head. The benches are full with people in awe. It's not happening to anyone but us. We want to feed them, but we don't have any bread, not for eating or for spending. Andy strolls into the high-class hotel across the street and tells the bartender in an Aussie accent as thick as it is fake that he'd like something for him and his girlfriend to feed the ducks. Back at the park, their bills are full of dinner rolls, and my arms are all scratches like when I was 11. I guess you can't really have a worse birthday after your first birthday. But if you can, I think I did, and mine was yesterday when I turned 21. I went to the sushi where I ate the fish, and to the park where the birds ate the bread, and to the doctor where she ate me. I did a good job of sounding sure. She put her hands in me for the first time since him. She felt from the swelling of my uterine wall that I was between 6 and 8 weeks. We thought about my last period and the last times I saw him while we eyed her little desk calendar. We figured I conceived on Father's Day. She said, "Well, we may as well get it over with while you're here," and she got out the metal duck and the sticks for a pap smear. "She's enjoying this." She said, "We don't usually do the brushing when someone's pregnant, but since you're not keeping it," and I let her scratch my baby up. Now I'm so sorry I can just cry and cry. I wanted to slip naked between the cool sheets in my room, loud and full of my street's screeching traffic and screeching crack addicts, wake up to no one deciding. But I stayed at Mona's instead, out of a weird sense of obligation to act happy on my birthday. The guest room has bare walls, taller than the floor is wide. Disconcerting proportions. I slept through nightmares about enjoying sex and woke up having to pee. In the dark, I turned the crystal doorknob, scared like in a cottage from my childhood. Nothing. Locked in. Panicked, I banged the door in its frame, faster and louder until Mona's roommate turned it easily from the outside to free me. I held it open for the rest of the night, my awkward arm aching, in and out of cat smells and humid nightmares. I teach art to kids at a kids camp for a week. I teach them faces and patience, and I swell up with them. Their little wrists get better and better, and they're so brave to draw. Bethany is coming at 11 to model like for real artists. I'm excited to show them off to one another. On the break, the kids jungle gym me, especially the girls. The other teachers stand sipping their coffee with drooping shoulders. They teach these same kids. I don't know if they're jealous or relieved that it's me and not them in the middle of this screaming, tugging attention. A 6-year-old fingers my Empire Way shirt. "Are you pregnant?" Fucking kids. No, why? Because of my shirt? Nah, you just look 9 weeks pregnant. Later, I tell Mona, and Mona says, what, is she a fucking doctor? At home, the voices in the hallway don't go together. One man yells stern like I thought he was a cop to a whore. Get your pants down and pull your shirt up. While another man's voice is laughing like an old radio. The woman isn't saying anything, but I can hear her. This morning, there was a blue ladies' deodorant just inside the front door, at the bottom of the stairs, kind of hidden in the corner. 2 days ago, in the heat, Bethany saw a lady put a tampon in on the sidewalk of my street. It was Laura, the prostitute my upstairs neighbor is in love with. Yesterday, she was in the hallway, lying on the floor. It sounds like there are a lot of different people, coming in and going out, loud like drunk. They're cackling out in a cheer and a threat. I have an exhaustion that's a book and a dream. Teaching week's over. It's 9 a.m. and we have nowhere to leave to. Bethany fries perfect zucchini pancakes while I slice the cantaloupe from the food bank. Mona brings fresh bread and daisies. We play Scrabble. Crumbler, haha. Fraggle, ha. I roll a joint and we smoke it. Mona plays her pink guitar and I paint a cake eating an apple. Bethany reads out loud when Yannick Murphy gets funny. We smoke out front and see what the delivery guy who works across the street is saying with his wide mouth. We dance to Gene Vincent and paint our nails all the same fabulous fuchsia. The sun shines in. Mona dozes on the couch and I paint and paint red and yellow. She sings me the songs she wrote me after Montreal when we stopped sharing a bed, and starts a supper of brown rice, steamed garlic greens, yam fries, and spicy mayo. Corn on the cob. I snooze and read and snooze and read. We stay like that for 8 days.
Thank you, Laura. Next we have Linda Bolton. Linda's working on her MA in English. She started writing while in France as a way to reassure herself that communication was still possible. And in the piece she's going to read, you will see how courageously she uses words to enter other worlds and perspectives not her own. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to be reading some sections from a bigger work titled Thoughts to Be, and it's in the voice of the main character, and his name is Tom. I'm afraid of drowning in the air like my father did. He breathed in so much, the drops collected in his lungs, drowned him before he had time to take off his hat in the presence of the God that he was meeting just then. Damnedest thing. I never really liked water at all, to tell you the truth. Something about its liquidness, its fluidness. I don't like it at all. I've never been one of those people who ate a watermelon or bought a waterbed. They say those things are bad for your back anyhow. Waterbeds, I mean. I'm talking to you, Bea, because everyone else has left me. But I didn't see it coming. Like erosion on a riverbank, it took time, and I didn't realize I was alone until the water was seeping in my shoes, soaking my feet, and putting me in a foul mood. Bea, I can tell you lots of things about where I've been the last years, working and traveling all over. I can recall the things that we did when we were kids, going to birthday parties and playing at recess. I remember when we were dating and I'd take you to school dances or the movies, and I remember leaving. I also remember one conversation I had with Mike. I don't mind telling you, Bea. Mike was my boyfriend. Maybe you can see the sympathy of the situation. Sympathy for both of us, I'd hope. We were lying in bed. It was night, and our bodies were sweaty and tired. My breathing was deep and low, and Mike's eyes were closed. There was a streetlight outside the window, and I pretended it was moonlight spread on our skin until Mike would get cold and pull the sheets up. Then Mike asked when we would tell people about us. About us? I asked. Yes, he said. I said I didn't know. He said he wanted to tell people so that they could be happy and celebrate with us. And I said, people knowing wouldn't make our relationship stronger, that we're already real and committed and together. I held him a bit tighter to emphasize. What difference would it make? I asked. Mike said it was important to him. I lied, and I told him it wasn't important to me, but what I meant was, I can't tell, not anyone. Mike turned over with his back to me, and I was glad because I didn't want him to see fresh sweat starting on my face or hear my voice, small and pathetic. Bea, this is the hardest part. I imagine the night like this. I'm watching TV, comedy shows, and bad sitcoms. I'm drinking beer, feeling sorry for myself, feeling darkness inside, aching and lonely. Mike hasn't come home, and I can't say I'm truly expecting him. I can still hear my mom's voice telling me that my dad has had a stroke on one of my rare calls home, one of those rare calls when I actually needed home. Later, I'll say it was a construction accident. Later, I'll say it was a skiing accident. Later, I'll say it's a genetic defect. But for now, I'll tell you that I went for a drive. This is how I remember it. On a dark night, I drove to the park. No lights, no noise, tall trees to cover all of us. It might have been April or May. I might have been there a few times with Mike for a bit of fun and excitement. We weren't the only ones there wanting to be desired. The air was cold that night. I might have just learned my father was sick, maybe dying. I might have been tired of everything being fucked up. I might have wanted to take my mind off things for a while. I might have wanted to recover something. I might have just wanted some company. I walked from my car into the forest, and this is how I imagine it. Shutting the car door, walking past other cars to a path. Away from the parking lot, away from the road, branches brushing my coat. Dark night, black and purple bruised. This is how I imagine it. A hand reaching out, a zipper, hard in anticipation, touches, a live longing, a kiss. Stop. It could have been a movie. Branches snapping, breaking, branches making the sounds of men walking, hunting, crashing through them, fracture, fear belts, bodies found with steel boots. Collision, meteors detonate in my back, constellation, aqua turquoise, break, broken, gay, faggot, rib-crushed scum. Dirt in my throat, colored more than black, flowering from trees, falling on me, cold swell, vomit, mud, poison disease. Knees shattered, scream. Try to suck cock now, fucking animal, cripple, immobile rage, ache, starving lungs. Try to pray now, die, breathe. Lights out, curtain drawn, fin. Not a film. I wake with cracking twigs on my lips and fall asleep in a dead faint. Police might have found me curled around the trunk of a tree. I might have fought off paramedics through the wild confusion of a concussion. Who could love me now? B, do you wonder why I have these thoughts for you? Do you think it's just because I think you'd be sympathetic or because things are coming full circle? Laying in my hospital bed, I answer the questions from nurses and doctors. More medication, less food. The priest introduces himself, and candy stripers pretend to refill my untouched water glass. I wonder how long it will take to die, because I've been waiting for a while now. I shouldn't have listened. At the crucial moment, I heard you, and when you said breathe again, I did that too, and so I kept living. And even now, all I can think of is breath, and it's making time go by very slowly. Why did I have to listen to you? Damn it, I did what you told me, but you did nothing for me. You left me here, still breathing, and now all my thoughts run like this. Trees, bruised, dark, split open, fucked around a tree, cracking. Under the burden of darkness alone, shards of shadows, night becoming dark, silent, slash, bruises swelling. I am a fag. Beat me, hit me, hate me, I hate me. There. Truth. Lockjawed, back-whipped, branded arm, truth. Thank you.
I told you we would be visiting an underworld, a dark underworld. Thank you, Linda. Next, we have Rebecca Schneiderite. And Rebecca tells me she's a retired secret agent who sailed to Dell in a pirate ship. Remember, fiction is the art of possibility, and this writer takes that very seriously. I do know that Rebecca is a full-time student at Dell, and she freelances for the Dell News and enjoys writing poetry. So she is going to share some of her poetry with us this evening. Welcome, Rebecca.
I'm going to read 3 poems, 2 underworld poems, I guess, then a happier, lighter one. The first poem is called Midnight. When it's past midnight and the carriage doesn't disappear and I'm left here, that's right when I realized it's counterfeit, artifice, not magic at all, foreign, glorious fakery. The slippers splintered and slivered, blood pooled at my feet, and my prince leered and sneered and turned round, sought fresh meat, left me here all alone on this long, lonely street. Little Red took the round ones, since we're on the street. Beauty asked the doctors to put her to sleep. You swallow, you smile, and all fades to black. But you know, I stepped on the stairs and I stopped myself there, watching serving maids sweep up the glass, on my ass and the sinner's misfortune seeping through my veins. Well, you can't really solve our pea-racked backs with a painkiller's attacks. You get your promised glassy-eyed, happily ever after. But you can drug us or not, we're still courting disaster. The second one is called Junior High. Everyone who's ever heard it says it needs a better title than Junior High. If you have any ideas, please let me know. In 2005, we were all pretty happy. We discovered black eyeliner around when Leslie's dad died, which was when Lacey dated Danny, who called himself Danarchy, and was and was afraid of zombies, not even in an ironic way. And Lindsay was a lesbian, and then she wasn't, and then she was, and then she wasn't again. I can tell what month it was by where we're hanging out, who's cutting, who's kissing, and the color of Leslie's hair. This third one is called Icing on the Cake. The sun is shining, smoky through the snow, and oh, I love you, brighter than that glow, and harsher than the hard white cold outside that settles on the shrinking earth below. And oh, you should have seen the way I cried when the whole city sugar spun to ice, and I was shut outdoors. My severance, that even in the desert, cold winds blow. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rebecca. Next, we have Dylan Matthias. Dylan is a second-year journalism and English student at King's who began writing this novel, A Parting of Ways, in grade 11 for a high school English project. Tentatively aimed at young adults, the novel, if it fits any genre, is fantasy or science fiction. Dylan writes during any spare time he can muster, and I'm not sure when he finds that time if he's doing journalism and English, but he's very dedicated, and he's currently working on a video game script. Welcome, Dylan.
Really does sound quite strange to hear the introductions, but they're very. Oh, thanks for doing such an excellent job with them, Carol. So, I've just tried to pick a chapter that will give you a little bit of an idea of what A Parting of Ways is all about, without making you have to read all of it. So it's set towards the end of the novel, about 3/4 of the way through, and it's essentially a dialogue between Alyssa, who is a 13-year-old, somewhat disassociative school kid, and an older man called Kinar, who is a hermit, and he lives below the streets of a city called Menisk. Menisk was once glorious, and now is decayed and corrupted, home of a pseudo-government, polluted. It is a dystopia in every sense of the word. Alyssa spends most of her life wandering blindly through all the chaos, whereas Kinar has chosen to hide himself from the chaos, and he is decayed, as the city does. We pick up the story shortly after a military coup on Menisk's government, in which Kinar's good friend Robert Plank has died. Alyssa asks Kinar why the dust in Menisk's polluted atmosphere never gets cleaned up, and Kinar breaks out of his own reclusive personality and answers her clearly for the first time. The dust is angry today, Alyssa. The dust is Menisk. Remember that. It's the memories, it's the people, it's the history. Today, Menisk's shame is revealed once again. That great scar opened and bleeding freely. Today, the government of Menisk falls, the last remnant, however corrupt, of Menisk's history. I know what you think. You ask yourself, what history? Alyssa, this is no history that they teach you in school. Menisk was great, glorious even. The dust clings to that, covering over the decline, destroying it. There's an old power in the streets you walk, don't forget it. History is fading, and the dust is angry. It's dying, the past, and it's fighting, like anyone would, to survive. You'll understand someday. I know these streets like I know myself, fully and yet not at all. I don't know what will happen, only what is happening. Alyssa had stood and listened to the entire story. She stood in the dusty sand of Mort's Park, the play equipment in front of her. It was a wealthy area. She was in awe of both the park and the story, for just a crucial second as the wind blew and the dust swirled about her ankles. Then Keenar lifted his head and placed his hands either side of her face, leveling it until their eyes met. Alyssa didn't resist. She trusted those eyes. Keenar saw both the young eyes of a 13-year-old girl, hopeful and determined, but he also saw the wise, stubborn eyes of Robert Planck, the intense, friendly eyes of Bernard Kelray, and another set of eyes, cold and yellow, unblinking. All these eyes flowed in Alyssa's bright face, and he saw them all, and he was at peace suddenly, his torn and battered self reunited in one strong line. He saw his life, his purpose, laid out before him. He had been lost, but he had found it again, and it called him back. Still holding Alyssa's head, he closed his eyes, and the figure of Planck stood out from others, countless others, all swirling in the dust. Planck extended his hand, and Keenar walked towards it, until in his left hand he could feel the strong, firm grip of Robert Planck, and in his right the warm, small hold of Alyssa. He felt the dust, too, swirling, ever stronger, around him. Behind Planck stood the robed figure, heavily cloaked, with the cold, unblinking yellow eyes. "Your purpose is complete," it said, not coldly or cruelly, but almost warmly. He felt Alyssa's grip on his hand loosen, and Planck's tighten. He opened his lips to speak, and although he found it difficult, managed to say through the swirl, "Never forget the past, Alyssa." And he felt Alyssa's warm hand slip from his grip as the wind swirled about her. He closed his eyes and allowed the dust to carry him away. Thank you.
Thank you for that. A trip to another world. Yes. Next, we have Jenner Brook Bergen. Jenner is studying creative writing after focusing on European languages. On the side, she has been reading manuscripts for the local publisher, Invisible Publishing. Jenner writes realistic fiction with a willingness to venture into the quirky unknown. I tried to say magical and said, I don't think so. Don't get rid of that magical word. And venturing into the mysteries of why people, characters do the things they do. So please welcome Jenner.
So the first night of the workshop that we had, when I was walking there, it was pitch black. And the first exercise that we did was about color. And when I was thinking about color, I was thinking about light. So I realized that every time I'd sat down to write a scene, or every scene that I had written happened in the same kind of light. And it's that time at the day where, you know, it's kind of very dark, but also very light all at the same time. And looked it up. It's called crepuscular light. So last week, thanks to the time change, when I was going to the workshop, it was the first time I was walking to the workshop during that light. So in light of that, I'm reading the first scene, no pun intended. I'm reading the first scene where there are actual moments of complete darkness, even though they're all kind of birthed from those moments that happened in crepuscular light. So this novel that I'm trying to write sometimes is set in this place called Memorial, which is in Houston, Texas. My mom had a roommate when she lived out west. This girl had seen her dad fall into the water, slipping through the propeller of their motorboat. She barely remembered it, but when she cut her finger, chopping garlic bulbs, not only did she lose consciousness, but screamed with her eyes closed. My mom held her hand above her head, applied pressure, and then rocked her until she stopped screaming. This story amazed and terrified me. After the same thing happened to Caitlin's dad, I wondered if I had made it up, and if that story wasn't really about my mom's roommate, but about me. Dr. Roth was Caitlin's dad. He was the one who picked us up Tuesday nights from swim lessons, and he was the doctor from the Houston Men's Hockey Club.
Once he took us to the locker room before a big charity game, and we got the players to sign our new pucks. The cottage was on an island. In the summer, we drove the boat to it, and in winter, snowmobiles. Each of Doc Roth's siblings had a cottage on the island. All of Caitlin's cousins were girls. It was like Blue Lagoon without the sexual tension. Doc would joke he was outnumbered, worried we'd stage a coup and cook him on the barbecue. All the girls were good swimmers, lifeguard 1. I was still at otter level, and on really busy days at the regatta, I chose to stay on the shore. I did cartwheels and took pictures with the neon orange camera I got in a cereal box. They were always out of focus. All the girls were swimming off the other side of the shore, but I preferred to watch the water skiers. I'll always be grateful Caitlin didn't have to see her own dad die. I peed myself, and then I took another picture, or maybe it was the other way around. There never was a funeral. The 19 hours it took to clear the island of all the relatives, drag the lake, and drive home to Memorial was funeral enough. Caitlin and her mom moved away that summer before school started again in the fall. I rode my bike to their house, clicked out the kickstand, and hid behind a tree across the street, watching as the moving van was filled with boxes and Caitlin's exceptionally comfortable bed. After the last lamp was tucked inside the truck and it was all taken away, the Roths evaporated. I was under the distinct impression I'd never have to think about them again. 6 years later, it was my little brother's birthday. Bear would turn 9. My mother woke up to find her car missing. For years, we had a monstrous baby blue van. It roared as it approached, and we termed it the Beast, though not in an endearing way. It had been given to my mom by an ex-boyfriend. She thought it was nice. I thought that if he owned our car, he was attempting to remasculate himself after my mom had given him an ultimatum ending with a vasectomy. But soon she was one sterile boyfriend fewer and one new cherry red hatchback richer. It was a beautiful car, and I learned to drive on it. Being in that car never failed to make me feel like we had arrived, that quick to follow would be our big house, dishwasher, and dog. Perhaps that was what made me feel the overwhelming sense of anxiety at the thought of having to wait another 8 months to take a road test and rid me of my meager learner's permit. When the police found me, I was lying on my back in the football field at school. I had always liked sports since I was young, and the way the grass was manicured so acutely always made me marvel at the caretaker's control over its natural tendency to grow. The local rent-a-cop who rounded the neighborhood had reported a red car breaking through the gate of the parking lot and idling in the football field with its brights on. As they approached the field, they noticed the rear window broken and a cake still in its pan sitting on the hood. I made my little brother's birthday cake before I left the house, perfectly frosted with Wilton number 3, 5, and 7 tips, 4 hours on the detailed New Era Spider-Man webbed costume. After getting a lift to our government-subsidized townhome complex, I apologized to my mom. I just really felt bad for ruining Bear's birthday, but it wasn't my fault the cops wouldn't let me bring the cake home in the cruiser. She drove me to school once the sun came up. The breeze was nice when it whistled through the broken window. Apparently, after I had failed to attend the last 3 of my high school finals, the faculty became confused. They didn't have to check my record. With a graduating class at Memorial High of less than 60 that year, they knew me. I called the directors by first name. The principal had written my letter of recommendation for my college applications. The staff was further disconcerted after a landscaper had found a set of beaten books in the football field and returned them to the office. Each one of my library loan texts and notebooks, accompanied by a small envelope of photos. 4 days after my brother's birthday, the principal called my mother and I to a meeting. This meeting was with the principal also happened to be 4 days after the one in which my brother decided we needed a garage sale. The same day, in fact, my mom found a small neon orange camera in my box in the basement, the funny kind you'd get in a cereal box. The same day she decided to take it upon herself to have the film developed for me, leaving the photos on my bed silently in the same way she would leave beautiful dresses when I was young.
Thank you very much, Jenner. Now, our last reader of the night, Dr. Aldona Wyacek, is unable to join us this evening, but she wanted to share a story that she has been working on, and I think this is probably her first foray into fiction. She is a faculty member of the physics department here at Dalhousie who is exploring creative writing, which I think is very cool. And she's been a very enthusiastic participant in one of the workshops this semester. And she has really demonstrated, certainly to me, how the disciplines of arts and sciences have much more in common than one might imagine. So I would like to read the story by Aldona, and she entitles it Poppies. As usual, I made my way through the Arras train station toward the arrival platform from Paris. Busy people, full of purpose, looked through me as they rushed ahead to meet their lives. They would march through me, too, if it wasn't for me effortlessly gliding out of their way at the last possible moment, like a leaf swerving past a rock in a stream. Standing at the head of the platform, I watched people worn by the heat clamber off today's train and walk toward me. Some corner of my mind registered sweat binding my shirt to my back. The late afternoon sun blinded me and turned the travelers into luminous creatures. Gradually, as they passed me on my right, their halos faded and their mortal features reappeared. A middle-aged, red-faced man puffing angrily at the heat, a young woman stoically rolling her suitcase to the confident beat of her heels, pounding the pavement, a set of tired but happy-looking parents patiently speaking French to their 3 little hyperactive satellites, a pair of grubby teenage girls bent under the weight of their enormous backpacks, or was it under the weight of all the dangling decorations and utensils? They were blending into an anonymous stream when a tall man walking towards me, clearly not French, maybe German, grew taller still and blocked my sun completely with his shadow. His blonde hair really glowed like a halo, even at close range. He stopped, alert, and scanned the area around him, shoulders slightly tensed, ready for anything. He was cautious, but didn't try to hide being out of town. A rolled-up map stuck out of his shirt pocket. I was wrong. He was an English speaker after all. A day pack slung over his broad shoulders was made to look unfairly small. He clearly wasn't planning to waste any time in Arras. We both flinched when our gaze met. I quickly looked away. He jerked onward and continued walking. Pretending to wave to someone further back, I was conscious of his body passing within a few feet of me, compelling me to follow it. His form was not hard to track in the crowd. I watched from a safe distance as he checked into a nice hotel and later as he ate his dinner. The table next to him was empty, so I decided to go over and introduce myself. "Hey," I opened neutrally, "you plan on seeing a lot of different monuments tomorrow?" He sized me up for several long seconds without replying. "I'm a volunteer tour guide with Veterans Affairs Canada. We do our tours for free," I offered calmingly. This one sure was distrustful of strangers. "No, I'm actually looking for a specific grave," he answered reluctantly. "A specific grave? I certainly feel like I've been here forever, and I can tell you that not many people come here for that," I trailed off. He shifted his eyes to my twitching hands, forcing me to continue. "Actually, I don't plan to stay in Arras much longer. It's time I was moving on." We made more awkward small talk while he ordered another beer. The waiter ignored me, which was just as well because I was really starting to feel odd. The visitor loosened up enough to tell me he was looking for the grave of his great-grand-uncle, who was barely 20 when he died during the Battle of Vimy Ridge. I told him that my name was Thomas, but as I shook his hand and learned that his own name was Jacob, I marveled at what could have possessed me to lie to him. Faking tiredness, I said casually that we might run into each other tomorrow, since I would be running some of my last tours, to say goodbye to the place. That night, I had the nightmare. I dreamt again that I was a World War I soldier cowering in my muddy trench as the battle raged around me. A shell exploded so close that I was thrown on my back, and my teeth slammed on my tongue, filling my mouth with blood. Another shell detonated nearby. but I only felt the vibration in my chest and fresh mud falling on my face. I worked frantically to clear it out of my eyes, and when I did, I saw Charlie leaning against the opposite wall, arms folded across his chest like a mummy, his eyes squeezed shut. I couldn't hear him screaming as he fell over and died. I tried to get up and scream myself, to run as fast as I could in any direction, but, as it happens in dreams, no sound came out of my mouth, and my legs didn't work. I couldn't remember which side I was supposed to shoot at, Allied or German. I felt my army tag, but couldn't read it through the mud. I took off my hat, but instead of a coat of arms, a metal skull and crossbones were sewn on. The trench started filling with muddy water that smelled of earth and blood. I screamed as I sat up in my bed, my sweaty arms reaching up towards the ceiling, where in the dream I was clawing a collapsing trench wall. The heat wave broke in the night, and heavy rain cleansed the city. I woke up late, tired and stiff-muscled from sleeping in the cool draft. After lunch, I went out to give my last tour, but the fields were empty. Only the French went about their daily business. Disappointed and bored, I decided to go where I knew Jacob would be. He was videotaping the gravesite, which inexplicably made me feel grumpy. He shut off the camera and called out to me excitedly, a big change from yesterday. I found him. The route wasn't well marked out at all, but I got lucky and I actually found him. My mother's going to freak out when she sees the video. I walked over to where he was standing and asked which name it was. R. Thomas, Jacob read slowly, trying to hide the subtle quiver in his voice. Born 1899, died 1917, 75th Mississauga Battalion. Grief overcame me, too, and tears brimmed in my eyes. Neither of us looking at one another, Jacob spoke again. I can't even begin to imagine how these guys must have felt. The trenches must have been hell. And look, nobody's even here today. I mean, the place is neat and tidy, sure, but all day I felt really creepy at how empty the fields have been. Will anyone take care of these things once the last veterans die? I don't know, I answered casually. But I'm sure old Reginald here really appreciates finally getting his first family visit. Jacob spun around to look straight at me, and simultaneously he took a step backwards. There was terror in his eyes, but I found myself only able to smile. I was certain now that I was leaving forever, and I had to say goodbye. It was nice to meet you, Jacob. You take care of yourself now. I left him trying to find his voice, and I walked through the fields. I was conscious of the air in my lungs and of each blade of grass bending obligingly towards the earth under my shoes. On my cheeks, the fire of the evening sun was quenched with salty tears as my heartbeat dissolved into the gentle rhythm of the swaying poppies. So that's Aldona's story. Thank you, Aldona. So that brings our evening to a close, and I thank you all once again for coming out to listen to all of us. And again, please give a round warm of applause to all the student readers who have done so well and have been so brave in getting up and reading from their work, which, as I mentioned earlier, this is, I think, the first time many of them have done so. And it is one thing to it's one thing to let somebody, read your story on the paper. It's another thing to share your story, read it aloud with a small workshop, which we've been doing, but it is truly another thing to read a story from your heart to people, who know you from other circumstances or people who are strangers. It's a very brave thing to do, I know. And so again, let's applaud all of the student writers.
Well, that was a real literary smorgasbord. I have a feeling I'm not going to need any bedtime reading tonight. I'd like to thank Carol for co-emceeing with me this evening. Thank you very much, Carol, and your introductions to the students were perfect. And I, too, would like to thank all of the students for doing your readings tonight, and I can assure you that this was the first but not the last open mic session that we'll be holding in this room. So now, before we move on to munchies and chit chat, I just would like to point out that Kate is here from Frog Hollow with copies of Glass Voices for sale. I'm sure that Carol would be very happy to, to autograph her book for you if you ask her politely. And what else do I have to tell you? Yes, we have crackers and cheese and drinks in the music room. The drinks will appear as soon as I run downstairs to bring them up, because we've lost our fridge in the staff lounge temporarily up here, so if you just bear with me. But I'd like to invite you all to stick around and chat with Carol and the other writers that you've heard tonight, and thank you all again very much for coming.